How's it going, guys? I'm Gavin Nixon. I'm an interventional physiatrist practicing private practice up in Anchorage, Alaska. Today, we're going to be covering intraosseous orthobiologic procedures, evidence and general techniques. Conflicts of interest, I am under a business relationship with Regenix, which is a carrier delivery of different stem cell therapies under a mutual non-disclosure agreement. The content of this presentation is drawn entirely from publicly available peer-reviewed literature. No proprietary information from any commercial partner is presented. All right, so kind of what we'll take away from this talk, hopefully, is some information on subchondral bone, thinking about subchondral bone as a potential target and pain generator, the data to kind of support why injecting into the subchondral bone is helpful, the general intraosseous technique for bone marrow harvesting, and for accessing joint-specific applications. So the pathology here, subchondral bone. You know, anytime that you get an MRI of a joint and you see inflammation, increased stir sequence, you can, this is not like a histological, this is not something that we can see. It's just an imaging correlation that we have some sort of metabolic activity in the bone is under stress. So you can see this really in any joint. And so if you look at a joint and you see a bone marrow lesion that has occurred, it means that there is some sort of inflammatory metabolic process occurring. When you take histological slides of that bone, you're going to see different changes, and that is a target for pain when we're developing osteoarthritis. The subchondral bone is long thought to be inert, but we know bone is a living tissue. It's recognized as a primary nociceptive source for advanced osteoarthritis. Bone marrow lesions on MRI track with symptom severity and predict clinical progression to osteonecrosis, more so than radiographic appearances alone. The cartilage health depends on a competent osseous bed. So if the bone is not functioning well, the cartilage above it is also not going to function well, and you'll see an acceleration of joint decay. So you want to treat the underlying bone, because if you don't treat the underlying bone, you're missing the actual pathology of the disease. Why do we deliver into the bone? The bone is a dense network. You have the cartilage layer, you have the hard cancellous bone, and then underneath it, the trabecular bone. There's a significant capillary bed that perfuses this area, and this is really where the disease starts when we're thinking about arthritis. Just quick overview, the bone is a dynamic homeostatic system that is sensing the microenvironment. You have a constant state of resorption, of laying down bone, and sensing the mechanical loads on the bone. So it's always changing, it's always remodeling. When there's mechanical overload or you start to see microdamage, you start to see inflammation that outpaces formation, and this end result will result in sclerotic, microfractured, poorly perfused bone. The lesions will form primarily from mechanical insult. Repetitive overloaded malalignment and paction will cause the trabecular network to start to fail. You'll see uncoupled remodeling, osteoclastic resorption. You'll see fibrous tissue start to invade. The way I kind of think about this from a spine perspective is like these are what your modic changes on your spine. It's a very similar type of thing that we know that the bone is not functioning correctly. So orthobiologics in brief, mainly I'm going to be talking about bone marrow concentrate. This is primarily taken from the posterior iliac crest. You're going to concentrate this down, and this is the therapeutic injection that we're going to be doing. Bone marrow concentrate is not just one thing. It's a mix of cellular and growth factors. It's progenitor cells, hematopoietic stem cells, signaling proteins. There's no active ingredient. Why do bone marrow concentrates address BMLs? It's primarily thought to be a paracrine and immunomodulatory pathway. It's not engraftment. We're not putting cells in here that are going to turn into new cartilage. This is primarily a signaling cascade. It's anti-inflammatory, anti-apoptotic, pro-angiogetic, and pro-remodeling. Some of the data we have shows that BMLs will regress after subchondral BMC. About to 2 centimeters cubed of volume will regress after 24 months after you target this with BMC. For patients who underwent BMC for advanced osteoarthritis of the knee, the patients who didn't receive subchondral injection were at a 4.4 times more likelihood to convert to a total knee arthroplasty compared to patients who weren't. Another one of the things is this is a bioenergetic transfer. When you're taking cells and implanting them into a tissue that's not functioning correctly, we know that they can rescue cells by transferring mitochondria, and we know that mitochondria will power the cell and help them function. So some of these interesting studies to show that they can go and rescue and shuttle energy to cells that aren't functioning correctly. So BMLs, these are kind of what you're going to be looking for in your knees, shoulders, hips, really any area that you would like to target. We have hips down here and some knees in this area. So some of this evidence, the large majority of this evidence has come from a French orthopedic surgeon named Dr. Hernigau, who has been doing this almost since the 1990s and collecting data on his patients. He initially was treating osteonecrosis primarily, and he started to basically do procedures where he would do a hip decompression on one side and then a hip decompression on the other, augmented with stem cells. And he found that the patients that he augmented could delay the progression of a hip replacement by 10 to 15 years. And he started to extrapolate this data out to the knees. Now it's being extrapolated out to the shoulders. So for knee osteoarthritis, there's a 15-year randomized controlled trials with 60 patients with bilateral knee arthritis, 120 knee randomized, and these are patients who were treated with one knee with subchondral bone marrow concentrate and the other knee with an intra-articular injection. And only 20% of the patients who had the subchondral bone targeted converted to TKA after 15 years, whereas 70% of patients who only had the joint targeted converted to 15 years. So a significant change in the patient's progression to having a knee replacement when you target the bone and not just the joint. When this was done for hip osteonecrosis, this was 189 hips, 116 patients. These patients all were steroid-induced hip osteonecrosis with a 5 to 10-year follow-up. This was a core decompression on one side, and then the other side was a core decompression plus iliac crest bone marrow concentrate. And the data very clearly showed that if you could rescue them in the early stages, that you could prevent a need for a total hip arthroplasty. The headline finding is that there's 3 times more hip arthroplasties needed when core decompression was performed without BMC. So pre-collapse hips and knees, or hips specifically, are very responsive. Once you get into the later stages, they are not as responsive. Kind of the 3 takeaways from his body of work is that there's a dose-response curve. This was done on non-unions, where they increased the dose of their colony-forming units to see at what dose you could get the bone to start to heal. You need to have about 600 colony-forming units per milliliter to have this clear dose response. So the volume of injectate isn't necessarily what matters. It's harvesting the amount of cells that you're going to get, and that is dependent on how many places you access and also on the patient's age. Earlier disease responds best, so pre-collapse hip osteonecrosis responds much better and only converts in 2 to 8% of cases in the earlier stages. If you're catching patients later on, you're not really going to have the same sort of outcome. And that bone is the target. At 15 years, subchondral bone marrow concentrate outperformed intra-articular bone marrow concentrate for postponing total knee arthroplasties. General technique for harvesting is typically going to be from the iliac crest. If you're treating large joints, the data supports that you need to have as many cells as you can get. So it's 120 cc's total extracted, so 60 from each side. You're going to be getting from the posterior superior iliac spine. This can be done under ultrasound or fluoroscopy. You just really need to know your safe zones, which would be you don't want to stab their gluteal nerves. That would be bad. And you want to avoid diving deep and hitting any of the gluteal nerves or arteries. It really is dependent on what you're comfortable with. This can be done safely under ultrasound. You want to find the posterior superior iliac spine, and you can come in and get multiple samples from bone. This would be in a lateral to medial trajectory in plane with your ultrasound. Typically, you're using a 4-inch Jamshidi needle to enter into the cortical space and taking your samples here. Cross-section, you just want to make sure you're going into the thick, spongy bone. You're not getting too inferior where the bone becomes a lot thinner, and you can enter into the pelvis. And
can you point out where the gluteal nerve is in that ultrasound on B? If is it at the top of the crest?
Yeah, so if this picture is in plane here, then the cluneal nerves will be far more superior. You talking about on the
picture over there? It's at it's at the top of the crest.
You should be in this picture. Hopefully, you're nowhere near the iliac crest. So this is probably in plane right here. So your cluneal nerve should be very far away up here.
Okay, thank you.
These are just some of the access points you can do. You can come from a contralateral oblique through the PSIS and get multiple samples, or you can come in under long axis and ultrasound and tap in on this way. Both are good ways to get into the bone. So for your knee, your general interosseous technique, these are obviously all going to be image guided. You're going to use a pediatric microtrocar or the smallest trocar you can get. Typically, I'm using a 2-inch 18 or 16 gauge pediatric microtrocar. These can be very painful when you're injecting into the bone because of the increased pressure. So this is all done under, conscious sedation, but you have to let the patient know you're going to be injecting typically very slowly into the bone. And you want to make sure that you're actually intraosseous. So the main thing you look for is contrast permanence within the bone. And as long as you see contrast permanence, you know that you're in some of that trabecular space. So this is an example of what you'd see. This is a patient with moderate knee OA who's got bone marrow lesions, primarily in the medial femoral condyle. There is a little bit of enhancement here at the medial tibial condyle. And you want to get into those areas if you can, but it's really been shown that you don't necessarily need to get into the bone marrow lesion. It's just indicative of disease at the bone, and that you just need to have as many cells as you can get into that area. So these are very pretty straightforward. You want to get a lateral. You want to make sure you're not by any of the neurovascular structures of the knee, so making sure you're not near the geniculate artery or vein. So you want to scan with ultrasound if you can, and then with your trocar, you're going to typically start in your lateral first to make sure you have your trajectory planned, and then you'll come to an AP view. And when you inject, you're really looking to make sure that your contrast is staying. And these are kind of pointed out here. You make sure your contrast is staying in the bone, and then you slowly inject, typically over a period of about 10 minutes. For this, you're going to be getting
the volume on that, Gavin.
The volume is 10 cc's is what you're going to get from 120 with the system that we use. And so 5 cc's goes into the superior and 5 cc's goes into the inferior. And then, of course, here would be your trajectories. With your hip intraosseous targets, it's going to be very similar. There's a couple different ways to get in here. I primarily, there is a trochanteric approach, which I have not done, and this is done with a drill from, and so you come down the bone corridor. I'm not really going over that, but that is one of the ways to get in if you're going to do a kind of a cord decompression technique. You can also do this under ultrasound as well, and so this is primarily going to be the more simple way, using another longer pediatric microtrocar where you can target. You want to avoid the articular surface if you can, and you also can treat any bone marrow lesions that you see on the acetabular surface as well. Your main considerations here are your neurovascular bundle medially. If you're, the pediatric microtrocars are really not too much bigger than a needle, so you just need to make sure you scan and that you're not going to get into those bundles. You always want to make sure you have 2 views, avoid the articular surface, and control your depth. So once you are entering the bone under ultrasound, you do want to make sure that you're taking fluoroscopy and make sure that you haven't gone too deep. So always have maybe 2 forms of imaging. And I'll briefly touch on the shoulder. Some of this data is still ongoing. It's not as strong for the knee or for the hip, but the same principles apply. You can get osteonecrosis of the femoral head, and so it's very similar. If you catch these patients in an early stage and you augment the bone, you're going to see a rescuing of that and preventing for total shoulder replacement. Key findings from his study of a randomized controlled trial of 50 patients followed over 10 years. These were all traumatically induced osteonecrosis, so there is a specific patient demographic this was tested for, but it reduced collapse from 74% to 10% in early stage post-traumatic humeral head osteonecrosis. And the approach for this is you want to make sure there's no neurovascular bundle, the axillary artery, circumflex artery, axillary nerve. You want to try not to go through any of the major tendons. And then when you're going in through any of the long bones, you want to try to not be directly into the middle of the bone because there's large sinusoids that you can enter that will pull away. So you want to be getting into the dense capillary bed. So you're usually going to be coming off to the side just a little bit. And here's a picture of one of the trocars coming in just distal to the supraspinatus here, and under fluoro here with some contrast permanence in the humeral head. We covered this here. So safety and limitations, this is all going to be image guided. You have to be using probably a combination of ultrasound and x-ray to make sure that you're not going to be going through something that you can't see. You want to avoid overpressurizing the bone. You use slow delivery, small volumes. And like with anything, this is going to be something that's under a total surgical, sterile approach. Typically, I don't use antibiotics for this. You can if you're going to be nervous, but not totally necessary. You want to have all of your safety views to make sure that you're not going to go too deep. So if you're not familiar with accessing bone in the hip, knee, or shoulder, you just need to get comfortable with your bone windows. And if you're comfortable in the spine, it translates very easily over to the peripheral joints. Where the evidence still falls short, since most of this data is coming from one person in France, but he's an orthopedic spine surgeon, his data is followed for 10 to 15 years for a lot of his cohorts, and they are doing their inpatient comparisons, so it's really hard to do a sham or placebo trial for this type. But I think, thinking about what we're doing in the spine, where when the bone in the spine is not functioning well and the disc starts to not function, this translates very similarly in my mind, where if you take an x-ray of someone's knee, about 67% of patients with symptomatic knee OA will show bone marrow lesions. And if you're just injecting into the joint, you're not really treating the pathology of the disease. So I think kind of a re-understanding about how we can augment and prevent patients from having to move forward through pretty advanced surgery, I think is important. When someone's talking about having their total shoulder replaced versus having a minimally invasive procedure, that's a really big deal because the recovery time for something like this is a week versus maybe 6 months when they're going to have something replaced. So yeah, 3 things to carry home. Think about targeting the bone, not just the joint. You want to select carefully. Patients who are over 80 years old are just going to have a lot less cell counts when you pull, and they're usually going to have more advanced disease. So you do need to set, realistic expectations. And you want to stay evidence-based. The best evidence we have is specifically for knee and for hip. The shoulder is still ongoing. But that's what I got for you guys. Questions for me?
I have a question, but I'll get Doug first. I may not totally understand the orthopedic process in this situation, but my thought is in the past when somebody has like an osteonecrosis lesion of like, let's say the distal femoral condyle or something, then they either go in and do like a microfracture or they do like an allograft implant. Mm-hmm. Has there been any like comparisons between those procedures and what you're describing?
Yeah, the subchondroplasty, I think, is what you're referring to. Yeah. Not that I know of, and that's something that I actually just learned kind of reading through this because I didn't know. It's almost like a kyphoplasty for the knee that some of the surgeons do. I don't know of any studies that compare those two head to head. All of this data is really looking in inpatient versus conventional orthopedic surgery and then augmenting with and without.
Yeah, so my feeling would be that you would probably be a precursor to the bigger procedure. Yeah. And you would have a much faster recovery. What I recall of those allografts in the knee is that they take several months to start to have functional relief. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that might be an interesting direction to go do a comparison study.
Yeah.
What kind of needle are you using for this?
A pediatric microtrocar, 16 gauge, usually 2.5. Just whatever you can get away with. The smallest is what I prefer. And you're really just corkscrewing it into the bone.
Have you ever used any of the calcium phosphate sulfate derivatives like from DePuy or one of these to do that? Okay. Right. Good.
Stayed strictly within the biologic.
And follow up on Doug's point, the pressure concern you have, that's by feel? Or it's something that you monitor?
It's just based on the patient. As soon as you start to pressurize their bone, they'll usually, it's very painful because you're putting a pretty large volume into the bone. So you'll just have to go slow based off of the patient, essentially. A lot of my patients are
so patients awake and giving you feedback.
Correct.
Questions, comments? Jeff.
I just want to thank you for that presentation. I'm very much into bone marrow aspirate and concentrate, use it for spine, every musculoskeletal problem I can think of that could always benefit from better biology. Only comment I wanted to make is, which I could make many, because I've been in this space for 10 years, developing technology, improving the regenerative capacity of the marrow, is the plasma is very valuable. And a lot of people get rid of it. There's so many, exosomes, EVs, soluble factors that are very beneficial. So especially a large joint like a knee, I load it up. I keep a lot of that. Just think you'll see a better outcome.
Yep. Yeah, there's some stuff I'm not allowed to talk about, but totally agree. Thank you, guys.
Good job.